What's up, Joe? What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Sports 360. I'm Jeff Fennell, and I'm here with our baseball guru, Rob Duran of Rob Duran Sports. Rob, what's up, brother? How you doing?
Hey, how's it going, man? Everything's good on this side.
Everything's good. Everything's good. That's good to hear, man. I know you have to be happy with the baseball playoffs underway. I know you watched all the games over the weekend. My Metsies took it on the chin, and they are now home for the holidays. That's it. They're done after a 101 win season. They're out of the playoffs early, so we'll talk about that. But we'll also talk about the other four matchups. You predicted you made your predictions, and I give you credit. Of the four series, you were 3-1, so you're off to a good start with your predictions. But let's just jump right into it, man, and talk some MLB playoffs, the playoffs that were, and then also touch on the series that are coming up. Where you want to start?
We'll start with Tampa. Tampa and the Guardians. That was I think that series went exactly as expected, where I picked the Guardians to win it, but I didn't expect anybody to score more than like 3 or 4 runs a game. And I think they scored 4 runs total in that entire series in the 2 games. So I mean, both teams have good pitching. Guardians, I think, have the more elite pitching, and they have one of the best pitching staffs, bullpen included, remaining in the playoffs, I think. So I think that series went as expected. The Rays were just too beat up, I think, going into the season and then going into the postseason as well. So, kudos to them for making it. But the Guardians, they're a young, hungry team, youngest team in the majors. They're just playing with house money, Jeff. They're out there having fun, and it showed this series. And the Yankees got something coming with the Guardians. It's going to be. We'll talk about it after in a little bit, but it's going to be a good series.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Rays Guardians, just in terms of the matchup itself, was probably the fourth out of the four series in terms of must-watch TV,
Yeah,
right? That matchup, wasn't going to draw a lot of eyeballs, and you can tell by the scheduling, right? The first game when the playoffs started, that game started at noon. It was the first
yeah,
game up, right? So what was baseball saying? We know folk ain't watching this game. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
So that game started at noon, and then it was Philly and St. Louis and so forth. But here, like you said, um, 4 runs, 4 runs total, right, between the two teams. A 2-1 game. No, yeah, 2-1
yeah.
game in game one, and then a 1-0 game that went 15 innings, right? So, I mean, they played 24 innings, and between the two of them, scored 4 runs. I'm glad. I'll tell you right now. I'm a baseball fan, working baseball, all the rest of it. I did not watch one inning of that series, and I'm glad I didn't because, man, you're talking about a snooze fest. But to your point, though, the Guardians, I think, showed themselves in a way that we've been saying. That fundamentally they're just going to be sound. They're going to pitch. They're gonna hit. They're going to put the ball in play. Right? They're going to run the bases. They're going to play defense. That's what they're going to do. It's not going to be flashy. And so it's going to be interesting when they go up against the Yankees, and we'll talk about that. But yeah, you picked that one. What was interesting, Rob, is that the Mets Padres series was the only one that went the distance. The other three
Yeah.
series were 2-game sweeps, including the Guardians. So yeah, so kudos to Cleveland. I think we both thought that Tampa wasn't going to be healthy enough to compete, and they weren't. They just weren't.
Yeah, they were way too many injuries, and they started getting some guys back towards the end of the season. Like Glass now came back, he pitched good, but yeah, the Guardians, like you said, they're a team that just they don't hit for power at all, but they put the ball in play. And I think that's what helped them out throughout the season, that stretch run to make it into the playoffs, take that division. And it showed with the series win in the wild card round.
Yeah, yeah. So why don't we stay in the American League and talk about a series that, from an offensive standpoint, was the total opposite of the Guardians and the Rays, and that's the Seattle Mariners and um, the Toronto Blue Jays. What did you? I mean, that was some series, especially the comeback in Game Two by the Mariners.
Yeah, the Mariners are something special, man. And I'm glad that we finally get to see them in the playoffs after the run they made last year, because they're an exciting team to watch. And like you said, that second game where they came back to win, I'll tell you, I was looking at the score and I was like, all right, we're going to full series here. I was ready for that. And then all of a sudden, they start chipping away, they come back, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. This team is no joke, man. And they did it. Listen, they didn't get great pitching that second game, but their offense showed up. They're an all-around great team. I think their bullpen, it's not talked about enough, but they're built for October because they're able to hold it down, man. And I'm excited to see that series with Houston and Seattle because I think those are two powerhouse teams. And I think Seattle, it could be a dark horse coming out of the AL, and I wouldn't be surprised.
Well, in that last game, the second game of the series, I mean, they were down 8-1,
Yeah.
and were able to overcome a 7-run deficit and win that game. And you got to give them credit for their resilience, and their confidence is really high right now. And I think once they clinched the postseason, I think that changed things for them. You know what I mean? They got the monkey off their back. They were
Hmm.
able to exhale. And right now, I think they are probably one of the more confident teams out there. Obviously, we haven't seen the Braves and the Dodgers and the Yankees and Houston play yet. But of the wild card teams, you really have to look out for the Seattle Mariners.
Yeah, that's not going to be an easy series for Houston. And who knows? Maybe they end up sweeping Seattle, but I think it's going to be a dogfight, man.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that series was entertaining. Um, Another series that I thought was really interesting was Philadelphia and St. Louis, the Phillies and the Cardinals. Philly won the series 2-0. That first game, great pitching. In that first game, St. Louis goes into the ninth inning with a 2-0 lead, and Philly scores 6 runs and ends up winning the game 6-3. And then in the second game, they got a early home run from Bryce Harper, tacked on another run, and Aaron Nola was great. Wheeler was great in the first game. Aaron Nola was great in the second game, and they won 2-0. So Philly did something that you don't expect from them, but I think people should start to expect from them. They had good pitching, right? And they were able to get some timely hits in that first game and piece together 2 runs in the second game. So they weren't like an offensive juggernaut in the 2 games, but their pitching was really good. And, you know, that has to bode well for Philadelphia, who's probably my second least favorite team after the Cardinals.
this this was your dream series, right
Yeah.
here with those two teams.
Yep.
Man, I'll tell you what. The National League. When I made my picks, the two wild card series were the most difficult for me to pick, and I actually flip flopped. I had it set once the brackets were set and everything. I knew who I wanted, who I was gonna pick. And as I was like jotting down my notes, I'm in the lab crunching numbers, all this stuff. I actually switched um, the next series we're going to talk about, but this one was one I had picked St. Louis from the get, and as I'm jotting notes, I'm like, man, I think Philly's gonna win. And I'm like, all right, no, no, no. Let me stick to my original pick. Let me ignore the gut feeling and keep going with St. Louis. But after that first game where St. Louis pretty much fell apart in that ninth inning, they forgot how to play baseball completely. The way everything was going down for them, and Philly just kept tacking on runs. Took six, scored six in the ninth inning. I knew the series was over right then and there. There was no way I thought St. Louis would recover from something like that. And I had a feeling that Philly would just keep that momentum going and take the series in a sweep. Like you said, their pitching was phenomenal. And I don't expect that to slow down going into the next series. And honestly, they can't afford that because they're going against the Atlanta Braves, which we all know that team is ready for a World Series run. So it's the way St. Louis broke apart though, man, was kind of hard to watch in that first game. But listen, Philly did what Philly's gonna do, and now they're moving on.
Yeah, and if you're a St. Louis Cardinals fan, I think you have to be disappointed with their co-MVPs, Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan
Mm,
Arenado, who just didn't get it done. They just didn't, and it's an end of an era. Pujols and Molina, their last games, and that was it was interesting to watch that though, Rob. How even though St. Louis ended up being shut out, Pujols got a hit in the eighth inning. Should have been a double, a little bit of bad luck where it hit the side, um, of the stands and bounced back into play. And so he was kept to a single. And then in the ninth inning with two outs, Yadier Molina kept hopes alive by getting a base hit too. And to me, I'm looking at that and I said, see, that's why these guys are great, right? Because they were going to give their team a chance to win.
yeah,
You know, they're both well past their prime, right? They weren't going to, you know, do they weren't in position to be heroes, but both of those guys, you know, got got base hits and gave the Cardinals at least the opportunity, right? They brought the tying run to the plate each time, gave the Cardinals an opportunity to get back into the game, and to me, it was just an example of just how good these guys have been throughout their entire careers. But in the end, Philly was able to come out with the win.
yeah, and like you said, Arenado and Goldschmidt only one hit between both of them in 2 games.
Yeah.
You're not gonna win anything with those two guys only getting one hit.
No. No. And speaking of getting one hit, that's a nice segue to Padres Mets because the Padres beat the Mets 2 games to 1. And in the deciding game, the Mets offense generated one hit, a single by Pete Alonso. And that was it. On the way to getting shut out 6-0. Joe Musgrove was the winning pitcher, and Chris Bassett took the loss. Look, I'll say a couple of things here as a Mets fan, and anybody who has been listening to the podcast knows I've been rooting for the Mets. I'm a Mets fan. And I often joke, you always have to say long suffering Mets fan when you talk about Mets. But all season long, I've been saying that offense is right. They need some dynamic hitters, right? They're missing one or two key bats. And I think in the end, Rob, that's what was the undoing of this team. That, quite frankly, I think that the lack of consistent offense ended up putting a great deal of pressure on their pitchers
Hmm.
because the Mets pitchers almost have to be perfect in order to win. I'll go back to that Atlanta series when they got swept, and that changed everything as far as winning the division. Again, the Mets lost 5-2, 4-2, and 5-3. It wasn't as if the Braves knocked them all across the park. But look at their offense, right? Right? 2 runs, 2 runs, and 3 runs. in order to win any of those games, the pitchers had to be almost perfect, right?
Yeah.
Right? They could give up no more than 1 run in the first 2 games, right, in order to win, right? Because they only scored 2 runs, and then in the last game, the pitchers would have to keep the Braves to only 2 runs because the Mets only scored 3. That puts too much pressure on your pitchers, right? When your offense doesn't show up for, games at a time, and I think that eventually caught up to the Mets. They lost the first game in this series 7-1. Then the offense comes back in the second game, they win 7-3, and then in the third game, they only muster 1 hit and they lose 6-0. That kind of offensive inconsistency, I believe, is one of the biggest reasons why the Mets are going home.
Yeah, that's spot on, man. I could not have said it any better. And listen, obviously Scherzer had his struggles in game one. DeGrom sort of did his thing in game two, but yeah, it all falls on the offense at the end of the day. They have to be able to hit consistently, and that hasn't been something they've done maybe the entire month of September, and then leading into now into October. And I kept looking at one of my friends is a Mets fan, and we were kind of talking at the end of last night's game, the game three, and I kept looking at Josh Bell, and I kept thinking back to me saying right before the trade deadline, man, if the Mets can pick up Josh Bell, not that he's gonna completely change everything, but he's a switch hitter. Obviously, he plays first base and DH, but a switch hitter. He has some pop, makes good contact. That's a guy that the Mets could have used in the middle of the lineup. Maybe they don't make the Darren Ruff trade or the Vogelback trade, and instead just trade for Josh Bell. I think that might have made a little bit of a difference as far as having some more consistent at bats in a big series like this. But listen, man, if you don't hit, you're not going to win. Pitching can only take you so far. And I know great pitching beats great hitting every time, but you got to score some runs. Like you said, in the Atlanta series, you can't expect your pitchers to throw a shutout every single time out. Whether it's DeGrom or Scherzer, whoever, you can't expect a shutout every 5 days. And it just can't happen. And we saw that this series, they failed to put hits together. They failed to put good at bats together, other than that second game, and that's why they're going home.
Yeah. And the other thing too that showed up in this series, which was something that the Mets were much better at in the beginning of the season, but quite frankly, after that series at home against the Braves where they took 4 or 5, and I think the series after that they had Cincinnati come into town and they swept Cincinnati. But after that, that was in early August. That was like the highlight of the Mets season, and
Mm-hmm.
from that point, they were choppy. They would, they had a couple of winning streaks, but they also, got swept by the Cubs and, you know, you know, lost 2 or 3 to the Nationals at home. Um, you know, lost 2 games to the Pirates on the road. I mean, they had, they just didn't, they just weren't clicking. And during this time, as you said, in September and then leading into October, one of the biggest failings of the Mets, they weren't able to hit with men on base and with
Mm.
men in scoring position. And then we saw the same thing in this series. They would get men on base, not last night, but in the first 2 games, and they just couldn't cash in. And eventually that comes back. If you leave runs out there on the bases, that comes back to get you, especially in the playoffs. And the Mets couldn't cash in.
Yeah, you leave anybody on base in the playoffs, that's going to come back to bite you, no matter what. Especially in a short series like this, where pretty much every game is a must-win, and it's frustrating. Like I'm a Yankees fan, not a Mets fan, but it is frustrating to see a New York team get eliminated so quickly into the postseason, man.
Yeah, especially after they had a great season. Look, you don't win
They
101
did.
games without being a good team. So they were a good team. But they seemed to sputter at the end of the season, and not just in the Atlanta series and here in the playoffs. They really didn't play well in September. The schedule was open for them where they had games against the Pirates and the Nationals and the Marlins and the Oakland A's and the Chicago Cubs, and they struggled. And that was a bad sign that, ended up, being, something that in the end just, made them a disappointment, I think. Um, they could have been better. They just didn't play well at the end. And here's the other thing that was a little disappointing for me, Rob. Joe Musgrove was dealing last night for the Padres, right? He was shutting the Mets down. Again, only gave up one hit. And then in the sixth inning, Buck Showalter came out and spoke to the umpires, and they had uh, he had the umpires check out Musgrove for a foreign substance, right? And they went to the mound and, they did everything, man. Checked his glove, checked his hands, even asked him, you could tell, hey, can I rub your ears? And he said, yeah, go ahead, because I guess Twitter was a buzz with, hey, why is
Yeah.
Musgrove's ears so shiny? He has some substance on his ears. He keeps going to his ears, and they found nothing. And the Mets didn't get anything else going on in that game. And as a Mets fan, I didn't like that. And I understand Buck said, look, I don't care the way it looks. My job is to do whatever I can to help this team win. And he was ready to wear it and to take it. And I get it, and I give Buck credit for that. But having said that, I still didn't like it, because to me it sort of reeked of desperation. The guy was dealing, he was taking your lunch money. You couldn't do anything about it. And so you want to say he's cheating. And I just didn't like the look. You were losing, lose like a man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Either go out there and hit the guy or not. But to do that in the middle of the game, I thought that was a bad look.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't like it at all. If you're gonna do it early. Don't wait till the sixth inning where you're pretty much the game is almost wrapped up at that point. If you're gonna do it early and get it out the way. But they waited till the sixth inning. Obviously, somebody must have whispered that Twitter was buzzing about his ear and all this stuff. And listen, maybe they were frustrated because I know the Padres were calling time a lot on Bassett right
Yeah.
before he was set. So maybe
Yeah.
that was just to try to throw Musgrove off. But yeah, I didn't like the way the optics of it. I understand, Buck he's old school. He doesn't care what anybody thinks. And it's funny sometimes hearing his press conferences in the middle of the game where Buster Olney will go up to him. He's like, "Well, Buster, you're assuming that. So what's the next question?" So, so I get
Mhm.
it, but I didn't like it either, man. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the end, look, I think the Mets were undone by things that started to show themselves in September and maybe even, late August, the inconsistency on the offensive side. And yes, they didn't get the pitching that they, would like to get. Um, but I think in the end, this is going to be about what the offense failed to do. And I think that led to the Mets being a wild card team and then ending up losing in the wild card round. So, with that, we're on to the LDS. We'll do the American League last so that you can talk about your Yankees last. So let's stay with the Padres and the Dodgers. Stay with the Padres, who are going to LA to face the Dodgers. Division rivals, no love lost between these two teams. During the season, the Dodgers pretty much had their way with San Diego. Do you expect more of the same in this LDS?
I do. This series is gonna have some fireworks probably. I'm not saying any fights or anything like that, but I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of talking smack, a lot of back and forth, all that stuff. So it's gonna be a very entertaining series. I'm not sure how many games it'll go, but I think the Dodgers ultimately take this take this series. The Dodgers are just too deep. They're too strong. Um, the Padres are a good team. We see that they have great pitching, especially in their starting staff. But I think the Dodgers, man, they're on a mission this season again, especially after falling short last season. So I expect the Dodgers to take this series.
Yeah, I mean, I do too. I think it's very difficult to root against, not root, but to pick against the Dodgers, right? They're the best team in baseball. And so someone's going to have to beat them. And San Diego, I I just wonder if psychologically
Mm.
the Dodgers just have their number and they know it. You know what I mean? And because after what was really interesting, Rob, was that after the blockbuster trade, San Diego picked up Josh Bell and of course Juan Soto. Um, and they also got Josh Hader earlier. But after that blockbuster trade, you know, maybe a series or two after the players came over, they played the Dodgers. And the Dodgers were like, yeah, it's good that you got those guys, but we still own you. And they
Yeah.
like they just destroyed them. And then they played a subsequent series and did it again.
Yeah.
So, to me, I think the Dodgers sent them a message. You might have gone out and got Juan Soto, and you might have got Josh Bell, and you might have gotten Drury, and you got Josh Hader, but make no mistake, we own you.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if that's in the Padres' head, coming into this series.
Yeah, it's like when your big brother beats you up, you go to the next room, do some push-ups, and think you're gonna go and beat him this time. That's kind of what happened there with LA and San Diego.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So I expect the Dodgers, to handle their business. I think if there's any game that San Diego could take, it will be the first game, maybe. You know what I mean? That kind of,
Mm.
hey,
Yeah.
Dodgers have been sitting, San Diego's been playing. They played well against the Mets. They're probably feeling really good, looking forward to this series. And maybe if they could steal one, it would be the first game. If they don't, I think this is probably over in 3 games.
Yeah, that
Um,
wouldn't shock me, to be honest.
yeah. So staying in the National League, Phillies and Braves, another situation where we have division rivals playing each other. And again, another situation where I think the Braves have pretty much owned the Phillies this year, especially in September. So I know you picked the Braves in your initial predictions, but do you still see it that way?
Yeah, the Braves are just too good. They're just too good. I don't think Philly stands a chance this series, especially where you're going into the season probably with your number 3 starter in game 1, and the Braves are ready to roll, man. They came into October hot, and I don't think they're going to slow down. I don't think Philly stands a chance.
Well, so the Braves, I mean, not the Braves, but the Phillies, they're going with what, Ranger Suarez in that first game?
Probably. I haven't seen it for sure, but I'm assuming that's who they'll go with.
Yeah, I'm looking now. So it's, yeah, Ranger Suarez against Max Fried. And I will tell you this, Ranger Suarez, the last 2 outings against the Braves, pitched really, really well. I mean, he's a lefty, he's crafty, he's confident out there on the mound. And, you know, I'm not saying he's going to do that again, but he's been better than I think a lot of people give credit, will give him credit for. And so it'll be interesting to see. And again, the Braves have been off. I think the time off, are you rested or are you rusty? You know what I
Mm,
mean? And I think that's going
yeah.
to be one of the questions that, all these division, all the teams that got the buys are going to have to answer. But in the end, I think the Braves are just, and I've said this, as much as I joke about going to Atlanta and all that stuff, the Braves are, maybe after the Dodgers, but they're right there with them in terms of being such a well-rounded team.
Yeah.
Every
They're
facet of the game, eh,
they're deep
they
too,
hit
man.
it. Yeah, they're very, very good, and so I look for them to beat Philadelphia. But I got to tell you, there's a part of me that sees this going 5 games.
Hmm.
I
That's
just
interesting.
I I I think being in division rivals, and here's the thing about the Braves. The Braves are very, very good at home, right? They're excellent at home. You can get them on the road. You can. The Mets jumped them. You know, even Philly jumped them. They had a 4-game set in Philadelphia after the Braves had swept the Phillies in Atlanta. A week later, the Braves went to Philadelphia for a 4-game set, and Philly won the first 2 games, and then Atlanta won the next 2, including the finale in extra innings, I believe. But Philly jumped them those first 2 games, and I think, going to Citizens Bank is gonna be colder than it will be probably in Atlanta. It's gonna be interesting, Rob. It's really gonna be interesting. Philly fanatic gonna be dancing on the dugout and stuff. You know, you're gonna have folk. The police are gonna be out there because it, whether it's a football game or a baseball game, if it's in Philadelphia, folk are
Oh
going to
yeah.
jail. All right,
Oh yeah.
somebody going to jail.
That is true.
So it's gonna be wild, man. So it could be one of those, man, where it might be a bit of a fight, and I wouldn't be surprised. I think the Braves are still, going to take care of Philadelphia, but I think it's going to be an interesting one. Um, Speaking of interesting, you've been saying this all along: Seattle and Houston. Um, just seems like a great matchup. Um, I think Houston. It's very interesting here, Rob, because I believe that all of the teams that had the bye have really done very well against the teams that they end up playing in the
Yeah.
postseason. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, Houston, and again, another division rival, right? Houston has done really well against Seattle, especially in the second half of the season. They swept them coming out of shortly after the All-Star break and so forth. Um, but I think it's going to be more competitive this time.
I can see that. I definitely agree. I think this series is going to be, obviously, Yankee series aside, my favorite series to watch. And I think Seattle wants Houston, and I think they want them bad. I think the fans
Mm,
of Seattle are ready to welcome the Houston players into the stadium, and they're going to be loud, man. I'm excited to see this series. And listen, I think Houston ultimately takes the series because I think pitching with the way Justin Verlander came into the season, coming off the big injury, the dude is probably going to win the Cy Young Award. But then they also have Valdez, who's an absolute beast. I think the pitching is going to be too much for Seattle, but it's going to be this series. I think will go all the way, with Houston ultimately taking that final game. But it's going to be a fight, man, and I'm excited to watch.
yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be a very entertaining series, and I there's a part of me that, as much as I want to see Yankees Houston, I don't know. I think Seattle might be the biggest upset in the division series is Seattle knocking off Houston.
I'll tell you what, I don't think you're the only person who feels that way
Yeah,
because I would love to see Seattle advance.
yeah. It's
And
gonna
not be,
be
and it's not because I have anything against Houston and the history with the Yankees. I just think Seattle is. I think they've grown into their own this season, especially late down the stretch.
so do I. So do I. I would prefer to see Houston win only because I want to see Yankees Houston, even though we haven't even talked about Yankees Guardians yet. And no disrespect to the Guardians, but I think most of the baseball world expects the Yankees to come out of that series. Um, and so if you think about Yankees Houston and all the history that's there, that's an intriguing matchup. But you can't go wrong, right? With Seattle either. But we'll see about that one. But let's go ahead to Yankees and Guardians. No, you're picking the Yankees, but why?
Well, if you look at this series, it looks like the Yankees will easily walk in there and just destroy Cleveland with their batting, with their hits, with their power. But like I said earlier, Cleveland has some really good pitching. And I think they're going to give some fits to the Yankees. I don't think the Yankees sweep the series, but I also don't think it goes the full length. Ultimately, I think the Yankees they're just going to overpower Cleveland to a point where it's like, all right, you guys are good, but we're definitely better. And I think they have to make a statement in Game 1, the Yankees do. And Garrett Cole has to go out there and give them a good 7, maybe 8 innings of shutout baseball and solidify himself, because there are a lot of question marks and a lot of people wondering, should he have been scheduled to start Game 1, or should it have been Nestor Cortez? And I think Garrett Cole has to go out there, give him that 7 shutout innings, 8 shutout innings, 10 plus strikeouts, and say, hey, I'm here. I am Garrett Cole. I'm the ace. I'm ready to roll. And I think he will. He will do that in Game 1. And I think the Yankees take this series probably in 4 games.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think the Yankees should come out of this series. What will be interesting, Rob, though, is if Cleveland just plays sound baseball and the games are close and it gets late, the pressure is going to build on the Yankees.
Big time.
You know, the pressure is going to build on them. And so it will be really interesting to see how it plays. Now, if the Yankees can, get a lead, I think they can run away and hide from Cleveland, right? Because Cleveland's offense is not its strength. But if they don't, and the games are close and it gets late, that fundamental way that Cleveland plays, getting men on base, moving men over, getting productive outs, you know what I'm saying? That kind of thing, man, it could really start to put some pressure on the Yanks. So I think the Yankees have to not only get the pitching, but I think it would be, I think they need to, bring their bats as well and show Cleveland, okay, you can't expect to score 3 runs in this series and win. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you're gonna have to do more than that.
Yeah,
Like,
and it's funny because this series, I think if you're whichever way you're looking at it, both teams want to get into the bullpen. Like Cleveland wants to get into their bullpen late. I think the Yankees have to get into Cleveland's bullpen early in order to avoid, like what you're saying, that late game situation. Because once you get into 7, 8, 9 with Cleveland's bullpen, it's almost lights out for you as a team. Like that late inning relief pitching that they have, especially that 9th inning. I don't want to see Cleveland's closer at all. I don't want to see him at
right.
all this series. So I think the Yankees, like you said, they have to show up with the bats early.
Yeah, they do. They definitely do. So, with your predictions, you have in the National League, the Dodgers over the Padres, the Braves over the Phillies, American League, Houston over Seattle, and the Yankees over the Guardians. I will tell you what, if you're right about that, Rob, I mean, the LCS is going to be power packed, okay, with Yankees, Houston, and, Braves, Dodgers. And what I think? I think the Braves know that they let the Dodgers off the hook back in 2020. You remember? Because they were up 3-1
Yeah.
in the LCS.
Yeah.
And the Dodgers came back, beat them, and then the Dodgers went on to win the World Series. And so there's some history here too. You know what I mean? And then the Braves knocked out the Dodgers last year. So there's a little Yankee Houston type history building with the Braves and the Dodgers too.
Yeah.
So can you imagine that you have Yankees Houston with all their history and then Braves Dodgers with their recent history? That would be
That's
something.
that's gonna be that's a moneymaker for
Yeah.
MLB.
Yeah. But here's the other thing though. If Seattle gets in there, it's still star power with,
Oh yeah.
Julio Rodriguez and all those guys on Seattle. And if Philadelphia upsets, the Braves, you got Bryce Harper, and Zach Wheeler, Reese Hoskins, right? You still got some star power there.
Yeah.
The only team that doesn't have star power that's remaining are the Guardians because they're the youngest team in the league.
Yeah,
But
pretty
even
much.
San
It just has
Diego, if they got
Ramirez
past
is
the
really,
Dodgers, yeah,
yeah,
Jose Ramirez, probably the best player that casual
nobody
fans,
talks about. Yeah.
right, right. Nobody talks about him. But even the Padres have star power, you know what I mean, with Juan Soto by himself, you know what I mean, just
Yeah.
being able to light up, October. So look, I think baseball has to be very happy. Look, if it was Mets Dodgers, they probably would be happier, just given, those two marquee franchises. But right now, great matchups, man. Great
Oh
matchups.
yeah. This is this has shaped up to be a great postseason, and I don't expect it to change. I think these
Yeah.
games are going to be electric.
All right. And so it all begins tomorrow. And so, no rest for the weary. And those teams that have been on the sidelines, Yankees, Braves, Dodgers, and Astros have to get back at it. And it all starts on Tuesday with the LDS kicking off. So, all right, brother. Well, man, this is good stuff. This is good stuff. And meanwhile, we're not going to talk about this. We'll come back maybe another time and talk about it. But meanwhile, your Jets and my Cowboys
Oh boy,
still doing
it's
pretty
looking
good.
it's looking good. I was looking
Yes,
at
indeed.
Super Bowl packages after the game yesterday, so planning that out. Not thinking too far ahead, but got to look into it.
And now, who did you guys beat yesterday?
The Dolphins.
Oh yeah, the Dolphins. You put a spanking on them too, right? Put up a
Yeah,
40
scored
spot on them,
40.
40 piece. And the Cowboys don't score a lot of points, but man, their defense is for real.
Lights out, man.
Oh
Wow.
man, do they get after the quarterback or what?
5 sacks,
And
I believe, yesterday.
yeah, and look, the Rams scored 10 points. And they had one big play, a 54-yard pass to where Stafford threw the ball. It was a perfect pass, right? Post route. I mean, Trayvon Diggs was right on the receiver, played the ball well, and the ball got just beyond his fingertips as he went to deflect it. And the guy caught it. Great catch. That led to a field goal. And then um, what's his name? Cooper Cup got a 75-yard touchdown,
Yeah.
on a nice little play, a little delay coming over the middle, got it. And it was a catch and run for 75 yards. But that was it. They had two real plays, right? And that was their entire offense for the game. The Cowboys defense is for real. And
Yeah.
they're playing Philadelphia, who's 5-0. Cowboys are 4-1. The Giants are 4-1. So the NFC East right now, very, very competitive. And the Cowboys are on their way to Philadelphia. I believe a Sunday night game this weekend. And again, it's in Philadelphia. So, cops are going to have to be out there. Judges going to have to be out there because folk are going to jail. Hey, that's how they roll in Philly, man. That's how they roll. So, when you start building jails in the stadium, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You got problems. And that's how it rolls in Philly. So, but all right, but we'll come back and talk some football too. But right now, all eyes on baseball. So, all right, brother. Well, good catching up with you, man. 3-1 in the wild card round, and now let's see how you make out in the division series. So, we'll keep an eye on it. We'll come back next week, and we'll talk more about the division series, and maybe we'll talk a little football as well. All right.
Sounds like a plan, brother.
All right. Appreciate it, man. Talk to you soon. Be well.